Good morning, everybody. I have my coffee. It says, let's see here. Oh, yeah. Ask your mom because I'm off duty, it says. I like this cup. It is, what is it to this morning? English toffee, cappuccino with a little bit of cinnamon sprinkled on top. There we go. Thank you. Thanks, Myrna. We have sound. Everything's good. We can delete the rest of that a little later. Oh, why am I doing that? Okay. Whew. It has been a busy week. I had a wedding out at Tobin Lake, so Friday morning I jumped in my car. I went to Melfort to, golf with my friend before I went to Tobin Lake, and then we went to Tobin Lake and had the rehearsal, and then I had to hang out at the lake all day yesterday because the wedding didn't even start till the wedding ceremony ended up being about 7:45 or something like that. Then I drove the 3 hours home last night. I need my coffee. I'm here. And I'm not a guy that drinks a lot of coffee. Except cappuccinos. And we even have a guest with us. Terry's with us this morning. She came into Warman to have church with us, to listen to us. And so we're excited to have her here too. Woohoo! So, my mind is just going all over the place right now. But we'll get that all figured out. Thanks, Lord, for your wisdom and your grace. I do want us to pray for the Meyer family. Some of you may know Mike and Shelby Meyer, and we were told this morning that Shelby passed away. They had come to our church. They're from Prince Albert. They had come to our church and been with us. Actually, Mike's the guy that I worked with that got me into the Grace Message in 2006. He's the one that ordered that DVD that came in a European format that his DVD player wouldn't play, and gave it to me, and that was my introduction to Grace way back then. And so we just want to pray for that whole family. That God just ministers to them and gives them comfort in this time. It's kind of interesting how, I think the Bible talks about there's joy and when babies are born, and last night there's joy in a wedding, and then, this whole life cycle you go through, and then, some people are just rejoicing and are happy and excited. Other people are going through difficult times. And I think it's important for us to remember that, and to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And so we want to remember them in prayer. Let me just see here. I haven't done this for such a long time. We want to thank you for all your donations. And if you want to donate to Grace Life Center, you can do that right through e-transfer at gracelifestoon@gmail.com. It should be on your screen right now. And we just appreciate everything that you have given over the years, and we just appreciate you keeping us afloat and everything that we do to bring this message of grace out to, for sure Saskatchewan, but even abroad. We just thank you for that so much. I was at this wedding, and even people at this wedding, they have seen us online. They listened online. Our online audience is growing, seems to be steadily, and we just thank you guys for that. And if you're online most of you are online this morning because I'm at home. So all of you listening online this morning, but those of you that generally listen online that don't come to the hotel room, we just want you to know that we appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining us on this grace journey. Father, I just thank you for your goodness, your grace, your love towards us. And as we just listen to this message this morning, or as I speak this message this morning, help me to do it with clarity, that your Holy Spirit will just help me to speak with clarity, and that you would challenge our hearts. But Lord, more than that, that we would leave this encouraged and built up. because we know you love us so much. Thank you. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So good. Have you found it hot this week? I was outside on my deck the other day, and my neighbor said, "It is hotter than hell." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I don't have anything to compare that to, but maybe it was." So as we come from my home, I know that it's hot out there, but I've got the air conditioning on. It's not too hot in here. I even turned the temperature up just a little bit because I knew Terry was going to be here, and I usually have stuff cold. Anybody that's been in my house, it's usually, "Oh, your house is so cold," because I like it cold. But let me ask you a question this morning. Have you ever felt like you are being squeezed? You just feel like under pressure, possibly like you're facing a fiery furnace, and it's this, this pressure that comes to you on all sides. And even though you have faith in God, sometimes you wonder, God, are you even here? Are you there? Are you with me? I feel all this pressure, and I feel like, God, you should be taking this away from me, and I just don't want to feel all this. Where are you, God? Are you there? And I'd like to say, I know I have felt that way at sometimes. I have failed miserably to have grace under pressure, because sometimes I react instead of respond, and when I react, it's not so gracious. It's not so gracious when I speak. But I'm getting better. The more I understand God's grace, and the more I understand His love and all this, and it's getting in me, the more grace and love comes out of me. But I ain't perfect. I haven't got it all figured out yet. I hope like tomorrow and next year I'm even better than I am now. But sometimes I still find myself, I fail. Something happens and I failed. And so when I step back and I look at the why have I failed to give grace under pressure? Well, that was a question I had to really think about. And the root for me, and I think it's probably one of the roots for you as well, one of the roots for not responding as grace under pressure, and for me it's for sure, I feel like I have to defend myself. I feel like I'm being squeezed. I feel like this pressure. I feel like maybe even being attacked. I'm in a corner, and I'm like a badger. If you ever get a badger in a corner, they turn around and they fight back. And I can be nasty because I'm feeling like I'm being attacked, and I have to defend myself instead of letting God defend me. Instead of letting Jesus defend me, I have gone through times where I've just felt like I've had to defend myself. I know that I'm getting better because I can see it in my social media. There were times a few years ago I would put stuff out. I've had people like over 200 threads underneath a post because of the attack, and me defend, and name calling, and I'd name call back, and all that. I would do it. It was kind of a dig and name calling. I was very not gracious under pressure, and so I was thinking about that. And what do you know? One of the names of God is Magen, I think is how you pronounce it. It's Magen. And it literally means God is a shield about you, or a protective hedge surrounding you. I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to ask my lovely wife if she would go to my office and get my Bible, because in all the setting up, I forgot to bring my Bible this morning. But I did write this one down. It's in Psalms chapter 3, verse 3. And David says this, "But you, O Lord, are a shield," or a Magen about me, my glory, and the one who lifts my head. God is my defender. He is my shield. He puts a hedge about me. That's that whole word. I don't have to defend myself. And let me encourage you that you don't have to defend yourself. Jesus is your defender. And even Jesus, when he was brought in, he didn't defend himself. He actually was quiet. They were slapping him, mocking him. Not once did Jesus turn around and defend himself, because he knew the power and the strength of God defending him. And so for me, when I don't have grace under pressure, the root cause of that is because I feel like I have to defend myself. I've said something, now I got to defend it. Or something else has happened, I need to defend. And I have to sit back, take a breath, rest, and know that God is my defender and he's got me. He's got my back. And I want you to know that God's got your back this morning as well. And if that helps you to have grace under pressure, that God's got your back, man, that's a good thing. If that's all you get out of this morning, that's a good thing, that God's got your back and you can have grace under pressure. And we've been calling that heroic grace. And so what is this heroic grace we've been talking about the last few weeks? And it is the ability to stand firm and boldly proclaim your belief in the gospel of grace, absolutely. But it's also the grace to know when to not speak when everybody else is attacking or when everybody else is coming, or that pressure is there, and just to rest in his amazing grace and in his love, and that he's your defender. So along with that is the ability to live graciously with others and give grace towards others. It's learning to be gracious, to pursue peace and build up one another, not defending my rights and freedoms, but but let God defend me, and to pursue peace. I like the verse. I'm not sure if I wrote it down in my notes later or not, but it says, whatever it is within you, create peace. Whatever you have to do, give peace. As long as it depends on you, whatever part depends on you, give peace. So I have a confession this morning. I've confessed this before, but I really don't like the term that we label ourselves. Like, we're grace people. We've got the grace message, and we're part of the grace movement. And I'm not really fond of that, because honestly, every church teaches grace. They believe in grace in some degree, maybe not in the exact same way we do, but they still believe in grace in some degree. But I haven't been able to come up with a better term either. And it's a term that's widely used. You know, if people are in the grace message, you are highly favored, deeply loved, and abundantly blessed. Those are kind of words that go with that. And so while I don't like it, the term, right, it's kind of what we are, and I'll accept it because that's what it's been known as. But when we say grace, we really mean the unmerited favor, the unlimited love of God for all humanity. And I mean unlimited favor, unlimited love for all humanity. People that are in churches and people that aren't in churches, people that believe and even people that don't believe. God has unlimited favor, unlimited love for all humanity, and that the death and resurrection of Jesus, when Jesus cried out, "It is finished," he really meant it. He really meant it is finished. That this battle has been won and we get to rest in his victory. You know, when we say it is finished, what does that mean? Well, it means sin was finished. It's eradicated, right? It means the law was finished. It really means Satan was defeated. I've said this just a few weeks ago. It makes my head spin. All these people, and I was one of them. Don't get me wrong. I was one of them. I was fighting the devil every turn I got and every prayer. And and all of a sudden, I can't even remember when it was. There was just like this boom, revelation. Satan was defeated. I don't have to defeat him anymore because he's already defeated. We already have the victory over the devil because Jesus already gave us the victory over the devil. So I don't have to go and get victory anymore because Jesus already did that. I get to walk in victory. That's what being more than conquerors is. Overcomers overcomers is I get to walk in the victory that Jesus already has. You know, the other thing that was finished is condemnation and shame was finished. I don't have to live in condemnation. There is no condemnation for those who are in Christ. There is no shame. We need to take, that shame and get rid of it. And so many people live in shame. And even I've been listening to a couple of books by Renee Brown, and she talks a lot about shame and that we should not live in shame. Shame is, and she describes it this way. Shame is I am. Instead of, I did. Guilt is, I did this, but that's not who I am. Shame is when you take what you did and you put it on yourself, and this is what I am. And that is shame. And so we need to get rid of shame. That's not who you are. You are a new creation in Jesus Christ. Old things are passed away, and all things are brand new. And so Jesus did this for all of humanity. And so when we're thinking about the foundation of the law is what we do for God, or what we don't do for God, in fact. But the foundation of grace is what Jesus did for us. Let me say that again. The foundation of the law, and this is how we know if we're living a little bit under law or a little bit under grace, is are we doing this for God, or are we living that Jesus did this for us? So the foundation of the law is what we do for God, and the foundation of grace is what Jesus did for us. And because of what Jesus did, we can rest in the finished work of the cross and have complete peace that in Christ I am okay. Oh, that is such a relief to me. In Christ, I am okay. I don't have to do anything to try and earn God's favor. I don't have to do anything to try and earn God's blessing. I don't have to do anything to try and earn God's love. I am loved. I am blessed. I am favored just because of who God is, and I'm his child. Isn't that good news? That is awesome news. To me, I think about it as my own family, I was thinking yesterday, boy, because at this wedding, there's all these young boys. They're in their 20s, no responsibilities. Most of them didn't even have girlfriends, and they're out working, and they're making all this money, and they got all this stuff. But there's something about being a father now, and I get to provide for my kids. My kids get to come into my house. They are favored. They are blessed. They are loved. They didn't do anything to get to where we are. They just are here because of who their parents are. And I am who I am because who my father is. My father is the ruler of the universe, the creator. So man, that's who you are today. You are loved. You are blessed. You have his favor just because you're his kid. And because of grace, I'm not trying to please God. I know there's this verse, we've talked about this in the past, maybe we'll have to talk about it again. There's a couple of verses. One is in Hebrews. It's about, without faith it is impossible to please God. But when you go back and you study that word in the Greek, it doesn't mean to make him happy. Without faith it is impossible to make God happy. That's not what it's talking about at all. That word please is to come into agreement with. Without faith it is impossible to come into agreement with God. That's why it's important to have faith, because if you don't have faith, you don't know what God said about you, and you can't come into agreement with God until you know what he said and have faith and have your faith match with his faith. Without faith it is impossible to come into agreement with God. I liken it this way. I haven't had one for a long time, but it's been a while since I've had a Coke. I like Coke, but there's some people that don't like Coke. And so if we were going into a store and we could only had enough money to buy one drink, I want Coke and you want water. And that's like, oh man, that's so bland. But we decide we come in agreement that we'll have iced tea. So I don't get my Coke, you don't get your water, but we've come into agreement. That is what that really means. Together we come into agreement. Without faith, it is impossible to come into agreement with God. He is pleased with me. I'm the apple of God's eye just because I'm his child. I am a new creation. The old is gone and we've been made new. I don't know if you're listening this morning, but if you want to type it out on YouTube or shout it out, just say, I am a new creation. That's it. I am a new creation. So it's vital to know who we are in Christ, because what we believe will determine how we live, how we feel, and how we think. What we believe will determine how we live, how we feel, and how we think. And I want believers, I want you, Christians, to believe better so that you will live better, feel better, and think better. I want you to get out of guilt and shame and condemnation and always feeling bad about yourself. No, I think you are the child of the King. So that's why you need to believe better, because what you believe will determine how you live, how you feel, and how you think. The poet Solomon wrote this: as a man thinks, so is he. So I'm so glad in 2006, God started me on this journey in revealing his grace to me through that little DVD that this man gave me. And it's a message that's changed my life. Grace has changed my thinking. God is better than I thought. Grace has taken away my fear. I had so much fear of God. I've told you before, I used to go to bed every night praying that God would forgive me of all my sins, because I was afraid that the rapture would happen in the middle of the night, and I'd get up in the morning, my whole family would be gone, and I'd be there by myself. I don't know if you ever had that fear growing up in church. I had that fear. I had so much fear. I had fear of being displeasing to God. I had fear of failing him. I had fear of missing out. I had fear of feeling condemned. But grace has taken away my fear. Grace has taken away that fear of displeasing God or failing him, or it's taken away the fear of missing out. And the best thing is grace has taken away that fear of guilt, shame, and condemnation. Grace has made me a better husband and a father. Grace has made it way easier for me to talk to friends and with unchurched people. It was kind of cool yesterday. I was sitting at a table, and there's this young girl. This couple, they weren't sitting with anybody else, so obviously they didn't know anybody else. So I went and sat with them, and the young guy's 23 years old, and him and his girlfriend, and she's in Ridgedale and sometimes goes to church at a place in Tisdale. Anyway, she says, I know a lot of pastors, but you're the chillest. And I'm like, oh man, that's so awesome. These people that are unchurched, look at a pastor as a person that they can go to, as a person they can connect with. That's just, to me, that's just a beauty of grace, that I can go into all these situations, these people that are unchurched, and I have become their spiritual leader. The lady the woman that got married yesterday, she tells stories of how I did her father's funeral. It was 9 years ago, and she had a problem. She ended up in the hospital here in Saskatoon, and I went to visit her, and I was going to leave, and her mom had gone out, and she's begging me, no, please stay with me, and now get to do this wedding. And there's something about grace that gives us an influence on other people's lives without even trying, just being ourselves and who we are. And I've been set free, and that's why I can't stop preaching about grace, because I see Christians who are supposed to be free, but they have been set free by Jesus, but they're living bound up because of their thinking. We got to change our thinking and we got to change our belief to change our thinking. And so there's so many, even like Christians, that are bound up because of their thinking, bound up in their emotions, bound up in their living, bound up in guilt and shame. I see believers carrying a burden that Jesus said he would carry. Jesus said, come to me, I will carry your burden. And so I just want to see people set free. And when you have a revelation of grace, it's impossible to go back to believing the old way. Right, Terry? When you have a revelation of grace, and when it's there, it's impossible to go back and believing the old way. Some of you know what I'm talking about, because many of you have had your belief in God and His unmerited love and His unmerited favor, His unmerited grace. You've had attacks. You've been attacked by other Christians saying, "Oh no, you're wrong," or "Well, what about this in the Bible? What about that?" And you've been there. You've been attacked for your belief in grace. You've been ridiculed for your belief in grace. Some of you have even lost friends because of your belief in grace. Believing in grace, believe it or not, is not the easy way. I've had people say, "Kevin, you're just tickling ears with grace." I'm like, really? Well, then why am I being so pressured, under attack all the time? If it's just tickling ears, why do people seem to want to come against this message of grace? See, believing in grace is not easy. It's not the easy way. It's not the popular way. It's not the readily accepted way among Christians. But it is the most satisfying, victorious, overcoming, and freeing message of Jesus you will ever have. Fearless grace and standing firm in our faith. So I know I've talked a long time just to get to where I want to go. I want to go to Daniel chapter 3 today. And some of you have heard me preach this before. Some of you will have never heard this. Some of you have heard me preach this before, but you forgot that I've preached this, and you need to hear it again. And so in Daniel chapter 3, we discover 3 young men who were fearless in standing firm in their faith. Some of you know their names: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you listen to Veggie Tales, it's Rack, Shack, and Benny. So Rack, Shack, and Benny are under pressure. They're under pressure to bow down. Nebuchadnezzar had erected, I think it's a 90-foot statue of himself, brought all of his people there and said, "You must bow down. If you don't bow down to my statue, if you don't bow down to me, you're going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. You're going to die." I'll tell you, that's pressure. You got to do this or you're going to die. And some of you that have been journeying in grace, I know you're just going to love this. So there's always been part of this story that bothered me until a few years ago. And it's a small part that's been twisted, but it's regularly preached and accepted in our churches. There's even a song about it that I've had people say, "Hey, we should sing this song." And I'm like, not singing that song. No. And I think it's called "Even If," I think is what the song's called. Because it revolves how these 3 young men answered Nebuchadnezzar. Let me just read that part to you. In verse 17 and 18, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are answering Nebuchadnezzar. It says, "If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of the blazing fire." And then this is part here, this is important. "And he will deliver us out of your hand, O king." And then verse 18, this is the part that gets a little messed up, because it says, "But even if he does not," okay, we're going to get there in a minute. I want to show you something here. "Let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." So on the outset, in our English language, in our English Bible, it looks like the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are saying, "Hey, God can deliver us, but if he doesn't, we're not going to serve you." I want you to know right up, that's exactly not what it's saying at all. Okay? I'm going to show you this. It's going to be just a tremendous revelation to some of you. That's not what they're saying at all. They're not saying God can, but even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow down. No. So it seems on the outside that they're saying, well, God can deliver us, from the fiery furnace. But the question is, will he? But even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow down. It seems to imply that they would choose to die if God doesn't deliver them, then bowing down to the statue. But that's exactly not what it's saying. It seems spiritual. I'll admit that. We've made it seem spiritual. But there's no faith in that. There's no resolve in that. Actually, it's double-mindedness. And James chapter 1, verse 6 to 8, it says, ask in faith without doubting. Some versions say without wavering. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in all of his ways. So it seems spiritual if God does, good, but if he doesn't, okay, it must be his will. But it's so far from the truth of the nature and character of God, and that is a lie. It is a lie. And I want to show you today that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not double-minded. They absolutely knew God was going to deliver them. So before we read the rest of Daniel chapter 3, or the verses before it, I want to ask you a couple of questions. By saying God is able to deliver us and will deliver us, but then saying, but even if he doesn't deliver us, is that double-mindedness? I say yes. Yes, it's double-mindedness. They're saying we believe it might, but God might not want, that might not be God's will. So, I believe God can, but I don't know if he will. And so even if he doesn't, that's double-mindedness. They're saying we believe it, but it might not work out that way. So question number 2, Nebuchadnezzar says this: what God is there that can deliver you out of my hands? That's one of the questions Nebuchadnezzar asks. So if God chooses not to save Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego after Nebuchadnezzar says this, how does this even prove that God can, that God is greater, and how is that going to change the mind of Nebuchadnezzar? If they go into the fiery furnace and they die, Nebuchadnezzar is right. There is no God that can save you. What God can save you? Nobody, because you're dead. They die. Nebuchadnezzar goes on. Everybody else worships Nebuchadnezzar. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they are forgotten. That's the end of story. They're not in the Bible. That's just it. It's the end of story. They die. So how is that, telling Nebuchadnezzar, if they're not rescued from the fiery furnace, how does that tell Nebuchadnezzar that he is not the big guy? There's somebody bigger than him. There is a God that is stronger, a God that will deliver, and a God that will save. If they die, none of that takes place. And so this never made sense to me. So do you know what I found out? There is no double-mindedness. There is no lack of faith in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In fact, these boys, they are convinced that even if they went into the furnace of the furnace of fire, God was somehow going to deliver them. He was going to deliver them, and they were not going to die. I want to read Daniel chapter 3. We'll start at, let's see. Well, I guess we'll start at verse 12. And it says, somebody's ratting on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? They're coming to Nebuchadnezzar, and they're ratting them out. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Not just certain ones, they name them. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, he's giving them a second chance. In verse 15, if you are ready, at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, very well. Everything's going to be good. Just do it. You're not going to die. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast into the midst of the blazing fire. And what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Now, the rest of the story is Nebuchadnezzar becomes so hot, so mad, that he instructs instructs them to fire up the furnace 7 times hotter. That furnace is so hot that when they go to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in, the people throwing them in die. The soldiers throwing them in die because it's so hot. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego probably, most likely, had to walk in themselves because the people throwing them in died. And then they're walking around, and Nebuchadnezzar, he says, hey, didn't we throw 3 guys in there? I see 4, and the 4th is like the Son of God. Now, yes, that's the rest of the story. It's a great story. It's a great thing that happened. But I want to show you something here about that verse 18. If he does, great. But if he does not, he's going to deliver us from you. Can you imagine being the only 3 people out of thousands who stayed standing and not bowing down, just, going against the trend? They weren't the only Jewish people there. This was a time where they were in exile. There was many Jewish people there, but they were the only 3 that didn't bow down. They were the only Jewish people that believed in the Jehovah so strongly they would not bow down and refused. And even when they all were offered a second chance, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood firm in their trust in Jehovah. So before King Nebuchadnezzar, they were also fearless in their resolve. And they were saying, yep, if you throw us in, that's what you got to do. But if you don't throw us in, because, you're giving us a second chance, and if you choose not to throw us in, and, well, we're still not going to bow down. God's going to deliver us. And so it's the end of the story that's significant. After all this, they were made to prosper. I think it's in verse 30. Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon. So they went into this pressure. They were under pressure, facing a fiery furnace. And the end of the story is they trusted God. They went through this whole thing, and in the end, they were prosperous. Let me tell you this morning, you were made to prosper. You may be feeling attacked. You may be feeling pressure. You may be feeling like you're enduring a fiery furnace, or you're encountering a fiery furnace. I want you to know, when you stand firm in your faith and in the grace that God's given you, you were made to prosper. However, sometimes before prosperity comes a furnace or adversity. We could say that. And we find in this event, adversity was not and is not sent from God. That's what I want you to know. It wasn't sent from God. They had adversity, but it wasn't from Jehovah. But at the same time, God never stopped the adversity either. He could have just simply, he could have killed Nebuchadnezzar on the spot, I guess, made Nebuchadnezzar die, and they would never had to have gone through this. But I want you to know that God delivered from the adversity, and his name was lifted up. Through this adversity, God's name was lifted up. I think of the story of the lame man, and the people are asking Jesus, who sinned, him or his parents? And Jesus said, neither one of them. This isn't what it is. But I'm going to lift up the name of God. And he heals them right there on the spot. I don't care what kind of adversity you're facing today, and we all face adversity, different kinds of adversity. When you are resolved that God can and will deliver you, and that you are not double-minded, I want you to know Jesus will deliver you. It's not maybe he will, maybe he won't. It is Jesus will. He will deliver me, and I'm going to come out of this, and I'm going to be smelling good. Not even smoke was smelt on their clothes. I'm going to be smelling good, and God's going to cause me to prosper. But the question I want to answer today that I've alluded to is, were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego double-minded in the answer that they gave to the king? Did they believe God could, but question whether he would? And when reading, just in your English Bible, just like that, it kind of looks that way. But I want to show you a little bit different. You see, in verse 15, it's kind of a key to this whole thing. Nebuchadnezzar made a statement and he asked a question. He says, I will give you a second chance, but if you don't take this second chance, I'm going to cast you into the fiery furnace. So you got to look at that. He says, but in verse 15, it says, but if you do not bow down. Okay? Remember, verse 18 says, but even if he does not, and I'm going to get to there in a second. So in verse 17, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answer, and in verse 18, they're answering two questions. They're like, first of all, it is, if it be so. If it be so is, if in the context of answering Nebuchadnezzar's question, okay, when you look at the questions, and in context they're answering Nebuchadnezzar's threat of being thrown into the fiery furnace. And they are saying in verse 17, if you throw us into the furnace, our God whom we serve is able, and he will deliver us from the blazing fire, and he's going to deliver us out of your hand. And in verse 18, they're actually addressing the second question, in verse 17, they're addressing the statement. In verse 18, they're addressing the question, but even if not, but in your versions, it says, even if he does not. Now, when you read the Bible, this is a little bit of a hint for you. You'll come across words in italics. And those words in italics, they are not in the original language. They're not supposed to be there. People have put them in for clarity, but these words actually mess it up instead of giving clarity. And so the King James actually gets it right. Now, you know I'm a big proponent of the New American Standard Version, NASV. It is one of the most accurate literal translations of the Bible, but it gets it wrong here. The King James actually gets it right. And the three words there, it doesn't say, but even if he does not, it is, but if not. Just three words. They take the even out and they take the he does out. Right? And so when we read it, but even if he does not, that's not it. It's but if not. But what is if not? Is it stating that God might not deliver them? I want you to know, absolutely not. That's a lie that we've been told. In context, they already stated, if you throw us into the fiery furnace, God will deliver us. Now they are addressing Nebuchadnezzar's plan, like how his question and his statement. He says, if not, but if you don't, then I'm going to throw you in the furnace. So they're throwing King Nebuchadnezzar's threat back at him. It says, but if not. In fact, what they're saying, King Nebuchadnezzar, if you throw us in the fire, God's going to deliver us. He is able, and he will, and he's going to deliver us out of your hands. But if not, what does that mean? If you don't throw us into the furnace. It's not talking about God at all. It is not talking about God being able to deliver him, but if he doesn't deliver him, they're actually addressing Nebuchadnezzar's statement. If you throw us into the fiery furnace, God's going to deliver us. But if you have a change of heart and you don't throw us into the fiery furnace, we're not going to bow down. Do you see that now? It's not about God, being able to delivering them, and if he doesn't. No, this is in regards to Nebuchadnezzar. If you throw us into the fiery furnace, God will deliver us. But if not, if you don't throw us into the fiery furnace, King, we're not going to bow down. Do you see now why King Nebuchadnezzar got enraged and ordered the fire to be 7 times hotter? They just threw this right back in Nebuchadnezzar's face. So the context isn't about whether God will or will not. The context is whether Nebuchadnezzar will throw them in or he won't throw them in. Yeah, and I get it. We need to throw some of those little italicized words out of the Bible. That's one of the reasons I don't like that song, and I'll never sing that song in our church, because it's about even if he does not. No, that's the wrong context. This is about Nebuchadnezzar. If you throw us in, God's going to deliver us, and if you don't throw us in, we're not going to bow down. It's all about Nebuchadnezzar. They were fearless in their faith in Jehovah, in God, and they stood firm in their belief, and then they stood firm in front of Nebuchadnezzar. They looked right into the king's eye and said, if you throw us into the fire, God will deliver us, and if you don't throw us into the fire, we will not bow down. They were uncompromised in their faith. There's no double-mindedness. This was not about if God, we know God can, but will he? They were firm in their resolve. They were unshaken in their belief that God was going to deliver them. That was not the question. The question was, King Nebuchadnezzar, you said you're going to throw us in. Are you really going to do it? Are you going to throw us in? Because even if you don't, we're not going to bow down. They were uncompromised. It really changes the meaning of that whole story, doesn't it? It should, I hope it encourages us and challenges us, because we've taken this verse and said, oh, well, if it be God's will, he can do whatever he wants. If he does, he does. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. I'll tell you, that is double-mindedness. That's not the way God called us to be. There's a verse in Corinthians that says all the promises of God are yes and amen through Jesus Christ. It doesn't say all the promises of God are yours if he wills them on you, and you just, maybe you'll get them or maybe you don't. That's not the resolve. The resolve is to be unwavering in your faith. All the promises of God are yes and amen in Jesus Christ. And they were for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as well. I want to give you a closing challenge today. I think that too many times we as believers are double-minded. And I'm talking to me as well. I'm still working. There's some things that, I don't want to be double-minded. I want to be unwavering. And I still have that. I'm still journeying in this. We're in this journey together. I know that some of you have more faith in areas and are unwavering in areas than I am. And I know that there's some areas in my life that I have this unwavering faith, maybe a little bit more than you have, but we're in this together. I need encouragement when I'm wavering, and I want to encourage you when you're wavering, that together we can do this. So many times as believers, and I've done this, we say that God can, but we question if he will. I remember the first time I ever preached on the gift of the Holy Spirit, and at that time I believed in laying on hands and that the Holy Spirit would come on people, and they would speak in tongues. And I was called, had an altar call for healing as well. And I remember going in there because I had this faith training, and just even thinking to myself, well, if people come up for healing and they're not healed, I can just send them away and say, oh, keep going and believing. Just keep on believing. Already in as the minister, there's this doubt in my heart whether God will. When people come up for healing, will he heal them right there? Even with the speaking in tongues, I could tell people, I know you've got it. Just keep going home and keep believing. I'm already making excuses for why they're not leaving that altar speaking in tongues or healed. Double-mindedness. We often say God can, but we all often question, will he? And we wrongly use passages like Daniel chapter 3 and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to verify our belief that God can, but maybe God won't. And so we talk about the sovereignty of God, that he can, but he chooses not to, and it's wrong. It's double-mindedness. And when we think like that, we ought not to expect anything from the Lord. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fully expected God to deliver them from that furnace. There was no question. There was no wavering. That's heroic grace. They stood up for what they believed. They didn't argue with Nebuchadnezzar and tell him how wrong he was. They just told him how great their God is. When I was writing this, that really hit me. You know, when we stand up, even with other believers, we don't have to tell them how wrong they are. We just have to tell them how great God is. I used to tell people how wrong they are. Sometimes I get pulled into that still, just my personality. I try not to, but I don't want to tell people how wrong they are. I just want to tell people how great God is. They showed the king graciousness by living with the consequences of their decision. The fire that was so hot that they didn't even run when their captors, died throwing them in. They just walked right in there. And not only did God deliver them that day from the fire and from the adversity they received, but they also, at the same time, after they came out of the fire, were promoted and blessed and prosperous. In this day and age, in our country, we need people who are full of fearless grace, fearless in our belief, but gracious in our living. I want you to know that fearless grace, heroic grace, is not just in your belief, but it's in your living as well. That's what heroic grace is. Not just to believe in the grace of God and to push that, but to be gracious. So we need people who are full of heroic grace, people who will stand up and are fearless in belief, but gracious in living. We need people who are unwavering in faith, no double-mindedness. We need men and women to stand up and proclaim that God can and that God will. God's got your back. And if I could have this prayer, it's, Lord, help us to have unwavering faith and unwavering grace. Let me pray for you. Lord, I just thank you so much for each one that's listening to this channel this morning, this message this morning, or whenever people are watching it this day. And Lord, I pray that we would be challenged and encouraged to be unwavering in our faith, but to be super gracious in our living. Help us to have heroic grace. Help us to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that even in the midst of pressure in a fiery furnace, they would not back down from their belief. They had grace to believe. They had faith to believe. They were not double-minded that you would, but would you? They knew you would. Help us to have that kind of faith, that we know that God can and that God will. I pray each one of us will be encouraged today. In Jesus' name, amen. If you need prayer this morning, maybe you're not feeling well, I just want to speak healing and health over you in Jesus' name. Whatever you're going through, maybe you're facing adversity. I want you to have the faith to face that adversity, the grace to face that adversity. And I want to just pray that God leads you through that and gives you strength and wisdom through your adversity. Because I know on the other side, there is something good for you. There's a blessing on the other side. There's prosperity on the other side. And I just speak that into your lives even right now. Grace and peace to you. We will see you next week. Next week we'll be at the hotel and just fellowshipping with one another. Again, it's going to be so good. Have a great week, and we will see you next week.